Chapter 1: First Contact and First Sparks. The salty Pacific air whipped Amelia Hernandez's hair across her face as she surveyed the wreckage. It wasn't exactly the colossal squid she'd hoped to find during her late-night research dive, but this was definitely unusual. A sleek, silver capsule, half buried in the sand, pulsed with a faint, ethereal blue light. The smell, however, was undeniably alien. A peculiar blend of ozone and something vaguely floral, like a spaceship had crashed into a lavender field. Amelia, a marine biologist with a penchant for the bizarre and a healthy disregard for safety regulations, cautiously approached. The capsule shuddered, a low hum vibrating through the sand. A section hissed open, revealing him. He was tall, impossibly slender, with skin the color of a twilight sky shimmering with an inner light. 6 long, elegant fingers graced each hand. His eyes, large and expressive, widened as he took in Amelia, his gaze lingering a moment longer than strictly scientifically appropriate. "Greetings," he said, his voice a melodic baritone that seemed to resonate in Amelia's chest. The words, however, were utterly incomprehensible. Amelia blinked. Hi? Are you okay?" She gestured vaguely at the wrecked capsule. "Because you seem to have had a bit of a landing." He tilted his head, his iridescent skin shifting subtly. "My translation matrix malfunctioning. Environmental parameters unstable." He pointed a slender finger, adorned with what looked like tiny, glowing gemstones, towards the ocean. "Salinity unacceptable." Amelia chuckled. "Salinity? Honey, you're on the California coast. The ocean's pretty salty here. It's practically brine." She thought for a moment. "Are you an alien?" He blinked again, this time seeming genuinely surprised. "Affirmative. Xylos. Planet Xylos. Kepler 186f system." He paused, then added with a slight frown, "My name." "Xylar." Amelia fought back a grin. "Amelia. Nice to meet you, Xylar. From Kepler's 186f. That's impressive. So, any chance you packed a spare translation device? Or maybe a survival kit that doesn't involve spontaneously combusting on contact with seawater?" Xylar's brow furrowed. "Negative. Trajectory unforeseen. Impact significant." He winced dramatically, touching a hand to his head. Currently experiencing mild existential dread. Amelia found herself unexpectedly charmed. Well, existential dread is a classic symptom of alien spaceship crashes. "Don't worry, I have some very strong coffee back at the lab. And maybe some chamomile tea, if the existential dread is particularly persistent. You wouldn't happen to have any interesting bioluminescent properties, would you?" she asked, leaning closer, her curiosity outweighing her professional boundaries. Suddenly, Xylar's skin began to glow with an intense, pulsating blue light. The effect was breathtaking, utterly mesmerizing. It started subtly, like the first shimmer of dawn, then intensified, bathing the beach in an otherworldly luminescence. Amelia gasped, completely captivated. From the nearby town, terrified screams echoed. "UFO! It's a UFO," a voice yelled, followed by the frantic blare of police sirens. Xylar, startled by the reaction, stumbled back, his glow flickering erratically. "I apologize. Unintended side effect." He looked at Amelia, his big eyes wide with a mixture of concern and something that looked suspiciously like amusement. "Perhaps less light next time," he whispered, his voice now tinged with a soft, almost flirtatious undertone. Amelia felt a strange shiver, a mixture of awe and an unexpected surge of attraction. This was definitely going to be an interesting assignment. And possibly, a very interesting night. Chapter 2: Cultural Clash and Bioluminescent Blunders. The next morning, the small coastal town of Seabrook was abuzz. Not with the usual gossip about the local fishing competition, but with the bioluminescent alien invasion that had lit up their night. Amelia, sporting dark circles under her eyes from a night spent reassuring a bewildered Xylar and dodging increasingly frantic phone calls from her superiors, found herself at the center of a media frenzy. Her boss, Dr. Albright, a perpetually stressed man whose hair seemed to be fleeing from his scalp in all directions, burst into the lab, waving a newspaper headline proclaiming, "Alien invader turns town blue." "Hernandez," he roared, "explain yourself." "An alien? Bioluminescence? This isn't in the grant proposal." Amelia, ever the unflappable scientist, calmly pointed at Xylar, who was attempting to make toast using a complex array of what looked suspiciously like alien technology. "He's from Kepler's 186F. Had a bit of a navigational mishap. The bioluminescence is a side effect of his mating rituals." She added the last part quietly, feeling a blush creep up her neck. Dr. Albright's eyes bulged. "Mating rituals? Are you suggesting that he's trying to?" He stammered, looking utterly horrified. Xylar, oblivious to the mounting tension, accidentally overloaded the toaster, causing a small, but spectacular, bioluminescent explosion of sparks and burnt bread. The lab filled with the slightly singed aroma of burnt toast and a faint, sweet, almost intoxicating scent emanating from Xylar. "The toaster malfunctioning," Xylar stated calmly, cleaning up the resulting mess with a remarkable dexterity despite his 6 fingers. "Earth technology, less refined." Amelia stifled a giggle. "Yeah, our toasters aren't exactly known for their intergalactic compatibility." The real problem, however, wasn't the toaster. It was the water. Xylar, unable to tolerate the salinity of the tap water, had attempted to adjust the town's water supply to his preferred level. The result? The entire town's water now glowed with a faint, otherworldly blue. "This," Dr. Albright groaned, his face turning a shade of green that rivaled Xylar's skin, "is beyond a PR nightmare. It's a bioluminescent ecological disaster. We need to neutralize this immediately." Amelia, however, saw a different angle. "Actually, Doctor, I've done a quick analysis. The bioluminescence is harmless, even slightly beneficial. It's rich in antioxidants." Dr. Albright looked at her like she'd sprouted a second head. "Antioxidants? Hernandez, we have glowing water. The EPA is going to descend on us like a flock of angry seagulls." Xylar, sensing the mounting distress, offered a solution, his voice tinged with concern. "I propose a trade. Information regarding advanced xylose technology in exchange for assistance with environmental adjustments. And, perhaps, toast that doesn't explode." He added the last part with a shy smile, his eyes meeting Amelia's across the room. Amelia's heart did a little skip. This wasn't just a scientific marvel, this was a bizarre, glowing, intergalactic romance waiting to happen. And Seabrook's water supply was just the beginning. Chapter 3, The Courtship Catastrophe. Seabrook's annual Founders' Day festival was not known for its intergalactic romance. It was, however, known for its pie-eating contest, its slightly underwhelming fireworks display, and its charmingly ramshackle parade. Xylar, having misinterpreted Amelia's explanation of courtship rituals, apparently, humans also have elaborate displays, albeit involving less bioluminescence and more awkward small talk, decided the Founders' Day parade was the perfect opportunity to initiate his elaborate mating ritual. Amelia, having spent the previous 2 days trying to explain the concept of personal space to a 6-fingered alien who viewed proximity as a sign of affection, braced herself. She'd managed to get Xylar into a somewhat human-looking, if slightly iridescent, jumpsuit, but his enthusiasm for the occasion seemed inversely proportional to his understanding of Earth customs. As the parade commenced, Xylar, to the astonishment of the judges and the utter bewilderment of the local Girl Scout troop, launched into a series of complex movements. They involved synchronized shimmering bioluminescent displays, intricate leaps that nearly took out the town's mayor, a small, portly man with a penchant for oversized hats, and a surprisingly graceful rendition of what Amelia suspected was a xylose mating call. It sounded, to human ears, like a mating call between a dolphin and a theremin. "Oh my God," Amelia whispered to her colleague, David, a nervous young intern who was already considering a career change. "This is worse than that time I accidentally released a batch of bioluminescent jellyfish into the community pool." David swallowed hard. "This is definitely worse. Much worse." "Is that glitter?" He pointed at a shimmering trail of what looked like space dust trailing behind Xylar. The crowd's initial amusement turned to stunned silence, then to a mixture of awe and absolute terror. Children pointed and screamed. Dogs barked hysterically. The town mayor, miraculously still upright, clutched his hat and fainted. Xylar, however, appeared utterly pleased with himself. He bowed dramatically, his bioluminescent patterns flashing in a triumphant finale, scattering a cloud of iridescent glitter that settled on the assembled onlookers like a layer of cosmic snow. Amelia, attempting damage control, decided a strategic retreat was in order. "Everyone," she yelled over the din, trying to sound authoritative. "This is a cultural exchange. A very enthusiastic cultural exchange. Please, don't panic. It's perfectly safe, mostly." The climax of the disaster came with the fireworks. Apparently, Xylar's pheromones reacted unexpectedly with the fireworks chemicals, resulting in a display that was far more spectacular and far more chaotic than anyone had anticipated. Instead of pretty sparks, giant bioluminescent jellyfish-like formations pulsed across the night sky, accompanied by a series of loud, whooshing sounds that sent a flock of terrified seagulls flapping into the town hall. The town's power grid went down. Later, amidst the chaos and the flickering emergency lights, Amelia found Xylar sitting dejectedly, surrounded by broken fireworks and a disappointed-looking flock of seagulls. He looked up at her, his usually radiant skin subdued. "My apologies," he mumbled, his voice laced with genuine regret. "I appear to have overestimated Earth's tolerance for extraterrestrial courtship rituals." Amelia sighed, a smile tugging at her lips despite the utter mayhem. This alien was certainly challenging her limits, scientifically and romantically. But as she looked at him, surrounded by the remnants of his failed mating display, she felt a strange tenderness towards the iridescent alien who had just turned her life and Seabrook's power grid upside down. This was going to be a lot more complicated than she had initially thought. Chapter 4: Love in Translation and Saltwater. The aftermath of the Founders' Day fiasco involved a lot of paperwork, a surprisingly understanding mayor, who had recovered remarkably well, possibly due to the antioxidants in the glowing water, and a considerable increase in Seabrook's tourism. The Lalian courtship catastrophe, as the local newspaper dubbed it, was now a legend. Amelia, however, found herself less concerned with public relations and more focused on Xylar. Their shared experience, despite its chaotic nature, had forged a surprising connection. She'd begun learning Xylos, a language that sounded like wind chimes playing a complex mathematical equation. He, in turn, was making surprisingly rapid progress with Earth customs, even if his understanding of irony remained somewhat limited. Their communication, however, remained a comical dance between language barriers and cultural differences. "Xylar," Amelia said one evening, attempting to explain the concept of Netflix and chill, "it's a human courtship ritual." Xylar tilted his head. "Netflix? A large, rectangular object? Chill? A state of low temperature?" Amelia sighed, rubbing her temples. "Not exactly. It's spending quality time together, watching movies, in a relaxed setting." She attempted a demonstration, settling onto the couch with a sigh. "Like this." Xylar, misunderstanding entirely, proceeded to regulate the lab's temperature to a sub-zero degree. Amelia, shivering in her lab coat, watched as icicles formed on the coffee cups. "Xylar," she shrieked, that's not what chiller means." Their attempts at intimacy were equally challenging. Xylar, whose species mating rituals involved elaborate physical displays and intricate pheromone communication, found Earth customs confusing. He tried several times to perform what he deemed appropriate romantic gestures, which mostly involved glowing, elaborate patterns on his skin, and accidentally setting off the fire alarm with his pheromones. One evening, while attempting to create a romantic atmosphere with bioluminescent seaweed, which promptly started glowing so intensely it triggered the lab's emergency lighting system, he confessed. "Your scent, fascinating," he said, his voice low. "Unlike anything on Xylo's. Combination, salt, and something uniquely human." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. His compliment, despite its unintentional implication of her smelling like a salty fish, was utterly charming. "You smell like ozone and lavender," she replied, leaning in. "A very unique blend." She lightly brushed a hand against his iridescent arm. The feeling was strange and wonderful. It was going to take time, effort, and perhaps a few more unintentional bioluminescent explosions, but somehow she knew they'd figure it out. This wasn't just a scientific curiosity anymore. It was a blooming, albeit somewhat chaotic, intergalactic love story. And the government was about to make it a whole lot more complicated. Chapter 5: Government Intervention and Alien Abductions, sort of. The idyllic, if slightly bioluminescent, piece of Seabrook was shattered by the arrival of a black SUV, the kind usually associated with men in dark suits and questionable intentions. Amelia, who'd grown accustomed to the occasional bewildered tourist snapping photos of the glowing water, instantly recognized the ominous aura of government intervention. Two men in sharp suits emerged, their faces grim, their expression suggesting they'd rather be anywhere but a small coastal town with inexplicably glowing water. They introduced themselves as Agents Thorne and Sterling, and their tone suggested they weren't here for a friendly chat. "We understand you're harboring an extraterrestrial," Agent Thorne stated, his voice devoid of warmth. "We're here to take him into custody." Amelia, protective instincts kicking in, crossed her arms. "He's not harboring, he's a guest. And his name is Xylar." "Irrelevant," Sterling cut in, his gaze sweeping over the lab, taking in the bioluminescent seaweed and the remnants of Xylar's attempt at a romantic candlelit dinner, which had involved a near fire with bioluminescent algae. "He possesses technology of significant national security interest. We're confiscating him, and the technology." Xylar, who'd been attempting to decipher a particularly complex instruction manual for Earth's plumbing system, looked up, his iridescent skin flashing with alarm. "Confiscation? Unacceptable. I demand a translator." Before the agents could react, Amelia sprang into action. This wasn't about national security, it was about protecting Xylar. And protecting Xylar, as she'd learned, often involved some degree of controlled chaos. Her plan, brilliant in its simplicity and utter absurdity, involved the research facility's submersible research vessel, a rather temperamental machine known for its unpredictable behavior. Her colleague, David, ever the reluctant participant in Amelia's schemes, was already frantically preparing the submersible. "David," Amelia whispered, "remember that time we accidentally attached the deep-sea sonar to the shrimp feeding machine? Let's replicate that, but with the agents." The ensuing chaos was glorious. As the agents attempted to apprehend Xylar, Amelia, with a flurry of strategic distraction tactics involving bioluminescent jellyfish and a strategically placed bucket of glowing seawater, managed to get Xylar aboard the submersible. David, in a moment of pure, unexpected heroism, managed to activate the submersible's advanced cloaking device, momentarily rendering it invisible. The agents, surrounded by a swirling mass of glowing jellyfish and smelling strongly of seawater and desperation, watched as the submersible disappeared into the fog-shrouded ocean, leaving behind a trail of shimmering, bioluminescent bubbles. "Blast it all!" Thorne yelled, watching the bubbles vanish into the ocean. "Get me the Coast Guard!" Amelia watched the chaos from the lab window, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. They had successfully evaded the authorities. For now. Their escape, however, had only just begun. And the next chapter of their unlikely romance would involve redwood forests, government agents who smelled remarkably like seaweed, and an increasing awareness of Xylar's unexpectedly potent pheromones. Chapter 6: Redwood Rendezvous and Pheromone Problems. The submersible, thanks to David's surprisingly adept piloting skills and a healthy dose of luck, deposited Amelia and Zyla onto a secluded cove nestled amongst the towering redwood trees bordering Seabrook. The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, was a far cry from the sterile environment of the lab. "We need to lose them," Amelia said, pulling a map from her backpack. "My grandma had a cabin somewhere in these woods. It's secluded." Zyla, still slightly shaken from his near abduction, nodded. "Seclusion, advantageous. Also, less glowing water to manage." Their journey through the redwood forest was a blend of adventure and unintentional comedy. Zyla, accustomed to the thin atmosphere of xylos, struggled slightly with the denser air of Earth, causing him to occasionally stumble or trip over tree roots, eliciting muffled giggles from Amelia. "Careful," Amelia chuckled, helping him to his feet. "These trees are older than your entire civilization." Zyla, seemingly unfazed, pointed a slender finger towards a particularly large redwood. "Impressive. Their bioluminescent properties, intriguing." He paused, his iridescent skin suddenly shimmering. "Perhaps we could borrow some for a private display?" Amelia's eyebrow shot up. "Private display? I think we need to focus on escaping the government first, Zyla." Their progress, however, was hampered by Zyla's surprisingly powerful pheromones. These weren't just attracting attention from government agents, they were attracting the local wildlife with alarming results. Squirrels, usually timid creatures, were chasing them through the woods, their eyes wide with an unnerving intensity. Raccoons, normally nocturnal, were curiously observing them from the branches, their beady eyes gleaming with interest. A particularly large deer, completely entranced, stood blocking their path, its ears twitching rhythmically. Even the bird seemed unnerved, their chirps replaced by a series of strangely harmonic squawks. "I believe," Zyla stated, a hint of embarrassment in his voice, "my pheromones having unforeseen effects on Earth fauna." Amelia, trying to suppress a laugh, pulled out a small bottle of pheromone neutralizer she'd kept in her bag, a precaution against dealing with overly amorous marine creatures. She sprayed it generously, and to their relief, the frenzied squirrels calmed down, the raccoon retreated to the branches, and the deer finally moved out of their way. The birds, however, continued to chirp oddly. They finally reached Amelia's grandmother's cabin, a quaint, rustic structure that seemed to be swallowed by the giant redwoods. It was dark, dusty, and smelled strongly of pine and forgotten memories. The cabin, however, offered respite. It was safe, for now. They were alone, surrounded by the towering redwoods, the scent of pine and damp earth a comforting contrast to the looming threat of government agents and Zyla's surprisingly potent pheromones. And, despite the circumstances, a feeling of intimacy began to grow between them, fueled by shared danger and a mutual appreciation for the unexpected joys of intergalactic romance. Their escape, however, was far from over. Chapter 7: The Final Bioluminescent Ballet. Their sanctuary in the redwood forest was short-lived. The agents, utilizing satellite imagery and what Amelia suspected was a highly advanced pheromone tracking device, had located them. Amelia, peering through the cabin's dusty window, spotted the telltale black SUV snaking through the redwood trees. "They found us," she said, her voice low, a mixture of apprehension and determination in her tone. "We need a plan, and we need it fast." Zyla, however, seemed strangely calm. He paced the cabin, his iridescent skin glowing softly. "I have an idea. Perhaps a demonstration of Zylo's defensive capabilities?" Amelia's eyes widened. "You mean the bioluminescence? Are you sure?" That last display caused a power outage and a flock of traumatized seagulls. "This, different," Zyla replied, a glint in his eye. "This display, tailored for maximum deterrent effect." His plan, it turned out, involved a coordinated display of bioluminescence that would not only deter the agents but also leave an unforgettable impression on the entire town of Seabrook, and possibly the entire world. He began to radiate light, the intensity slowly increasing, shifting from a soft blue to a dazzling, almost blinding, white. The cabin was filled with an unearthly glow. The agents, approaching the cabin cautiously, were met with a sight that would forever alter their understanding of routine extraterrestrial apprehension. Xylar, standing in the doorway, had transformed into a beacon of light. His bioluminescence wasn't just glowing, it was pulsating, morphing, creating complex patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid light. It was breathtaking, terrifying, and utterly mesmerizing. The display wasn't just a show of light, it was a symphony of color and energy. It pulsed with an almost hypnotic rhythm, each change of pattern accompanied by low, resonant hums that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath their feet. The surrounding redwoods were illuminated, their towering trunks bathed in a swirling, ethereal light show. The forest itself seemed to be participating in the spectacle. The agents, initially determined to apprehend Xylar, found themselves paralyzed by the sheer scale and beauty of the display. Their weapons dropped to the ground as they stared, utterly captivated. They were not just witnessing a display of alien technology, they were witnessing something far more profound, the power of nature, of art, of something beyond human comprehension. The display ended as suddenly as it had begun. Xylar stood, his skin shimmering gently now, radiating an almost peaceful glow. The agents, still stunned into silence, began to realize that apprehending him was no longer an option. They turned, their faces a mixture of awe and utter defeat, and walked back to their vehicles. Amelia, equally awestruck, approached Xylar. "That was incredible," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I think you've just redefined deterrent." Xylar smiled, a soft, self-satisfied expression on his face. He leaned in, his iridescent skin glowing softly in the lingering twilight. "Perhaps, next time, a more intimate display," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rustling of the redwoods. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. The threat of government agents might be gone, but the intergalactic romance was only just beginning, and it was going to be as spectacular and unpredictable as the display they'd just witnessed.